Hey, Browns fans, welcome to the Dawgland podcast. I'm Anthony Jokey. He's Jackson McCurry. It is week one of the 2025 NFL season, and we have the Cleveland Browns going up against the Cincinnati Bengals down at Huntington Bank Field. See, I got it right today, unlike yesterday. So we are here to preview the game between the Browns and the Bengals. So, Jack, this is certainly a matchup we've been looking forward to ever since the schedule came out. We always seem to play the Bengals tough ever since Kevin Stefanski became head coach. Well, let's kind of look at really quickly. The Bengals had a pretty crazy offseason, I would say, in terms of contracts. They were able to finally get the deals done with Trey Hendrickson. They were able to, they just signed Dalton Reisner just this past week. So, they were making fun of us with the trade situation with Miles Garrett. They went through their own thing, it seemed like, but they were able to finally get things done. It seems like they're on track now. How do you feel about what the Bengals were able to do, kind of keeping their whole core that they have together?
Yeah, and you didn't even mention the whole T. Higgins situation, which that got done in March. They paid him, so they have Higgins, Jamar, and Burrow locked up for the next several years. Yeah, the Trey Hendrickson situation was very interesting. They got to a point where they were fielding trade calls. The Browns were even a team mentioned for Trey Hendrickson, which would have been wild when we already talked about what the defensive line is currently constructed. Adding Hendrickson would have been insane, but they worked on a 1 year resolution at least. They're gonna have to go through this whole saga again in the offseason. But yeah, I mean the Bengals, they're coming back. They're still loaded on offense. The offensive line is still a question mark. You mentioned Dalton Reisner. He's backing up Lucas Patrick, who's never or has played limited amounts as a right guard and hasn't been very good. If you look at it PFF as a metric to grade out his blocking, but then the defense, plenty of question marks. Obviously, Hendrickson's back. They drafted Shamar Stewart, which that was a whole nother saga for them during the offseason. But yeah, I mean, they're always going to be a threat because of Joe Burrow, because of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and some of the other pieces on offense. But their defense is still a big question mark, and it's something that Joe Flacco and the Browns offense can hopefully capitalize on. But Anthony, I think we always see the Bengals, like every time you think that we might have the edge on them, and we look at the defense and think that it's just Trey Hendrickson and a bunch of guys, they always bring somebody up and makes an impact, and we're all like, man, where did he come from?
Yeah, I mean, they've been pretty decent for a handful of years now. Ever since they drafted Joe Burrow to be their quarterback, they kind of have piecemealed things together, rest of the team wise. They do have their cornerstones on offense, minus, the offensive line, which, you mentioned is still a struggle. When you look at this game on Sunday and you look at their offense, obviously Joe Burrow is Joe Burrow, top five favorite to win the MVP this season. You know what he brings to the table. When you look at the supporting cast around him, how do you feel the Browns match up here? Because we talked about yesterday the secondary depth, being a question mark. We do have the pass rush, so when you have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Yosavash, Mike Gesicki as their tight end, you know there are a lot of people you need to cover on this team and have to pay attention to. How do you feel we match up against these guys heading into Sunday?
We talked about the cornerback depth for the Browns and our season outlook, but when I go into this game, when we play the Bengals, Anthony, I always feel pretty good because Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome are always ready for the task. And you look at their career numbers against like Higgins and Chase against the Browns. Jamar Chase averages 57.7 yards a game in 7 matchups against the Browns. T. Higgins averages 46.6 yards per game in 8 matchups against the Browns. They've gotten their touchdowns. Chase has 3, Higgins has 4. I mean, so I feel like Ward and Newsome are going to be okay. But you mentioned Yosavas. You mentioned Gasecki. I think Chase Brown is the X factor here. Is the guy that finally got the chance to be the lead back last season. Had a pretty good year, almost 1,000 yards. He had 7 touchdowns on the ground. He's going to be a threat out of the backfield as well. So I feel pretty good about the way the Browns defense matches up against Cincinnati's offense, and it has been that way the last 5 years now since Burrow stepped into the league. Burrow's going to put up his numbers, but the one thing is the Browns consistently put pressure on Burrow. They've sacked him 27 times in 8 matchups, so that's just around 3.5 sacks per game on average. We know they're going to bring pressure. Burrow even admitted it this week in his media availability. He's like, I got to get the ball out quick because when you're going up against Myles Garrett, he's going to be there, and you don't have time to sit back and let the offense, let the routes develop. Like, you have to get the ball out quickly. So the Bengals have the weapons, but I feel like the Browns have the pieces on defense to match up against those weapons.
Do you see this as a case where if Joe Burrow talks about getting the ball out quickly, where our defensive backs can be super aggressive in terms of maybe jumping routes, forcing those turnovers, having an opportunity to win that turnover battle, which when, we were the top defense a couple years ago, we did a pretty good job, with those turnovers. Last year it was kind of the opposite. So do you feel that there's an opportunity on Sunday with, maybe being decent defensive backs and linebackers too, if you're covering the tight ends, being aggressive and attacking these quick routes if that's the route that the Bengals offense is going to go?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we know Ward and Newsome will be aggressive against Higgins and Chase. This is going to be a big first test for a guy like Carson Swedginger, who may be having to cover a Mike Gesicki, who's a veteran tight end, even Noah Fant, who's the backup tight end that they added in the offseason. Like, this is going to be a big test for the back seven of that defense, because we know what the front four is going to bring in terms of pass rush and trying to make Burrow uncomfortable. But you need the coverage to be aggressive, because one little slip up and Chase or Higgins is going to be gone for a touchdown. You can even throw Yosavas in there because he's a speedy threat as well. So yeah, like, the pass rush is going to come, but the coverage is going to have to step up. And I think when we talked about the cornerback depth, this is a big test for a Cam Mitchell, a Miles Harden, a Ronnie Hickman, like those guys that aren't going to be as on watch as like a Ward or a Newsome's going to be, and even a Grant Delpit you can throw in there because of his experience. For those guys in the back end of the secondary, like, this is their test to prove that they earn their spot on the Browns roster and maybe find their place for the next several years in that Browns secondary as well.
One more thing defensively. Do you feel that this defensive line is good enough to create pressure by only bringing four a majority of the time, that you will be able to drop seven in coverage consistently against this team?
I certainly think so. I mean, you look at it on paper, like, obviously we don't know like how aggressive like a Mason Graham's going to be. This is his first NFL start. But if you look at the other guys, Miles, Malik Collins, and I'll pair up Isaiah McGuire and Alex Wright as a combo, just because I would imagine they're going to split time opposite Miles. Um, I feel confident that they can rush just four and get after this offensive line. Cincinnati's offensive line has always been iffy. Like, they've invested in it heavily, whether it's free agency, draft picks, what have you. They just extended Ted Karras on Friday morning to a 1 year extension to be the center. But like, Amarius Mims was a first round pick last year. Orlando Brown was a free agent acquisition last year, and they still struggled. Like, so they keep investing in the offensive line, and it's still not working for them. So, and Jim Schwartz has exploited it in these last several years as Brown's defensive coordinator. It helps when you have the best pass rusher in the league in Myles Garrett, for sure, as well as some of the other pieces. But yeah, I feel confident that if they just rush four, they can get after this offensive line, and they can make Joe Burrow's day a nightmare, to say the least.
All right, let's flip to the offensive side for the Browns here. Obviously, we know Joe Flacco is starting. We talked about a lot yesterday in terms of our expectations and how this is going to go. How do you feel our offense matches up against the Bengals defense? I know they still kind of have a strong, defensive line here, even with the Cam Hubbard retiring. They still have Trey Hendrickson. Big opportunity, big question mark for Dewan Jones. Big just overall. Starting at left tackle. This is going to be the key thing to watch. I think all season long here. I know they do have a backup plan if things do struggle, but this is certainly the biggest unintended, if you want, question mark. Of this offensive line is the left tackle position. Will Dewan Jones be good enough to help the Browns help protect Joe Flacco as well as help them out in the running game?
Yeah, I mean, I think this offense can do some damage. I mean, you look up front, outside of Trey Hendrickson, who had 17 and a half sacks last year, their next guy who is opposite Trey is Joseph Asai. He had 5 sacks last year. BJ Hill had 3, Chris Jenkins had 3. So there's right there, there's a 11 sacks between those three guys to match up 17 and a half. So they can get after the quarterback, but outside of Hendrickson, like nobody on the defensive front is really scary. Like Hill's been a solid pro. Jenkins showed promise in his rookie year last year, but there's nobody there that's eyebrow raising. And that goes with the secondary as well. Like they really didn't bring any new pieces in outside of Demetrius Knight, who was their second round pick this year. Shamar Stewart didn't show much potential in the preseason. Obviously, the long layoff for him is definitely going to hurt. But they didn't really add much else in free agency to revamp the defense that was one of the worst in the league last year. Everybody talks about the Browns defense taking a step back. Like Cincinnati's defense, they ranked 25th in scoring last year and really didn't add much to try to improve it. So I feel like our offensive line can hold up on their end to give Flacco time to throw. The one thing, like the Browns running game, we talked about it in the season outlook. That's something that they need to get going. Um, Last year, Cincinnati gave up 4.4 yards per carry. Um, so if the Browns running game wants to get off to a strong start, that's where I think they need to really attack. Like we know that they can do things in the passing game with Flacco and Judy and some of the other receivers, but if they can get the running game going, Anthony, I think that'll bode well for the Browns come Sunday.
We kind of talked about a little bit. Obviously we won't have Judkins suiting up on Sunday. How do we feel the reps are going to split here at running back? Do we think it's going to be 70-30 for Sampson? Do we think it's going to be 80-20, closer to 50-50? Like, do you think they're going to, go like fully by committee here and see what works? Whoever has a hot hand, roll with them. How do we feel this is going to work?
I think that's the safe approach. Is to go by committee, go with a hot hand. I think Dylan Sampson showed some promising things in the preseason. Um, Even though he wasn't here, Rocket Sanders, what he was able to do in LA during the preseason, he showed some things, his potential. Him being a bigger back, I think you're going to see him potentially in some short yardage situations, which I think will bode well. And we know that, Stefanski and offensive line coach Mike Bloomgren, based on his track record at Stanford, I think they'll get creative in short yardage situations. We've seen that in previous years under Stefanski. But I think Sanders is going to be a weapon in that kind of situation. And then like we said in the season outlook, I think Jerome Ford is better when he doesn't have to be the lead back. Like obviously he's going to be the guy getting the first carries, but I think if they go committee and use Samson's speed and use Sanders' toughness potentially if he can get some carries as well, I think that's going to bode well just to go by committee. And if any of them get off to a hot start, then like ride with that hot hand. But also sprinkle some of those guys in certain situations as well.
2 years ago, when we went on that magical run with Joe Flacco, one of the biggest benefactors of that was David Njoku. Do we feel that that magic can be recaptured early on in the season, especially here in week one?
You would certainly hope so. I mean, the chemistry that they have off the field, and we've seen it on social media, like it's still there. Like there is, if they had, if they still made buddy cop films, I think Njoku and Flacco could be like the stars of that, just because of their chemistry, their friendship. It seems like they have a there's a definite love there between those two, and I think it's apparent that like David loves Joe because David's best production has been with Joe Flacco at quarterback. So you hope that the chemistry is still strong there on the field. It definitely looked like Flacco's developing a chemistry with Harold Fannin based on that touchdown against the Rams in the preseason finale. But yeah, like if Njoku can get off to a hot start, because he struggled throughout camp and obviously he had some personal stuff going on. But if he can get on track, like it's a contract year for him, I think he knows how productive things were with Joe at quarterback. Uh, if we can get that going, and then obviously the one to watch is Jerry Judy because um, the chemistry that Flacco had with Amari Cooper, who also shout out to Amari, just retired yesterday after a successful NFL career. Like if the production if Judy can have the production that Cooper had with Flacco, like there's things here, Anthony, that can show you like if Flacco still has that arm strength and everybody says he still does, like this offense could put up numbers in some games. I know it's not going to be, I don't think it'll be exactly like it was in 2023, but there's pieces here reminiscent of that 2023 run that like Flacco can still put up numbers because I think the cast of characters here, I think will they suit him very well, and he's had more time to work with them than he did in 2023.
So after Jerry Judy, after David Njoku, after Fannin, who's going to be that other guy that steps up? Is it finally going to be Cedric Tillman? Is it going to be somebody else? Who do you think is going to be?
I would say like I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say it's Isaiah Bond. I mean, he is getting rave reviews ever since he signed with the Browns, and like the media is hyping him up. The coaching staff, like Tommy Reese and Chad O'Shea, and their media availabilities this week talked him up. He's definitely got the speed. Tommy Reese said like he's got the route running ability as well. The only concern I have with him is he has a history of drops, and if he can get that corrected, this guy could be wide receiver 2 by the end of the year. I know, like, I want to see more of Cedric Tillman based on what he was able to do in that little 3 game stretch last year before his concussion that ended his season. But Isaiah Bond has the explosion that Tillman doesn't uh, necessarily possess. I think Bond is more explosive as a receiver, but if he can get the drops corrected, Isaiah Bond could be an underrated playmaker on this offense, to say the least.
All right. So now comes the time. We finally won a home season opener a couple years ago against the Bengals, in which it rained all day, completely out of nowhere, and we sacked Joe Burrow 5, 6 times. I think it was. It might have been even 7. Um, how do you think this game is going to go on Sunday? What is your prediction?
So I feel confident about this game. This is like the game I feel confident about when you look at the first 5 or 6 of the season, to where I think the Browns legitimately have a shot to win this game. I understand why they're 5.5 point dogs according to Vegas, but I feel like that line should be closer, especially because we are at home. But I think the Browns are going to win this game. I think our defense is ready. I think our offense feels slightly disrespected by a lot of the rankings out there in the league. And listen, I understand people are doubtful of Joe Flacco being able to do it again, this time at 40 years old. Um, I feel confident that going back to the running scheme, the wide zone blocking scheme, I think is going to help this running game get back in the right direction. But until I see it, I do give it a bit of a pause. Um, but I just feel like the Browns are going to win. And I think it'll be a close game. I'm not going to say we're going to blow out Cincinnati. Um, but I think the Browns win. I'm going to say it's 27-23 Browns victory. And we'll be sitting here Sunday night, Anthony, talking about another victory.
Yeah, you look at the schedule this year, and it's hard to pick out a game where they're like they're going to win this one. You know, it's going to be that kind of year. But I feel like because our track record against the AFC North with Kevin Stefanski as head coach, it seems like no matter what, we are always prepared to play in these games. It seems like we do a very good job of winning these division games at home with Kevin Stefanski, which is a huge turnaround from the years prior to that. I feel like we're gonna win this one. I don't know, you know, how by how much. Like I'm with you. Like I don't think, we're not gonna sit here and be like, oh, we won by 14 points. It's not gonna be something like that. I feel like, in terms of score, I'll probably be sitting around where you are. I'll say 26-23. I think it would be something that's that close. Hope game winning field goal would be fun, especially with a new kicker. But it just seems like we are always prepared to play these division games, especially at home, and which is, like I said, the biggest turnaround from years prior. So I feel like we got a good. I'm not saying 100% chance to win. I'm not saying a 75% chance to win. Like it's a full 50-50 split. I feel like in terms of this game, and I'll take us at home on opening.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, this is one of the winnable games. Like next week against Baltimore, might not be as confident because we're going to be in their home. We're going to be in their turf. We know how great they are there at Baltimore, even though the Browns have won a couple times there. But we kind of know like how things are probably going to go that game. This is one of those games where we know we have a chance to win. The crowd's going to be loud. The crowd's going to be electric. The weather's going to be good. We know the defense is going to be ready. The offense has got a lot to prove, but they feel confident in the scheme and the fact that Joe's back at quarterback. It all comes down to execution. It all comes down to complementary football. And I feel like on Sunday, we're going to get that and we're going to have a chance to win.
Well, I know we're on Cincinnati right now, but I think, are going to have a lot to say next week in terms of
Oh, without a doubt.
the Baltimore game, especially with the quote celebration that they're having next week. So,
Oh, without a
uh,
doubt.
we're looking forward to that. But obviously, we're looking forward to the Browns and Bengals on Sunday. Should be a very fun atmosphere down at Huntington Bank Field for the kickoff. It always is first game of the season, and if we get off to fast start, defensive line starts to show their dominance again in this defense. Starts to get back to 2023. Joe Flacco, gets us a touchdown in the first quarter. Like that place is going to start to build some momentum and start to get rocking, and I'm excited to be down there for that. So, it's going to be a fun time, and hopefully, like you said, we're sitting here Sunday night talking about a win, and sitting here 1-0. I feel like we won't get too many of those this year, but we'll take one, and hopefully we could at least enjoy a few of these things.
Without a doubt, man.
All right. We are going to get on out of here. Be sure to give Jack a follow at Jack McCurry08 over on X. Give me a follow at Anthony Joki, Joki. The Dawgland, everywhere you consume your media. We are on X, Facebook, TikTok, etc. YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. Greatly appreciate it. Until next time, always remember, go Browns.
Go Browns.